Well, thank you for being with us. It is Monday, the 28th of October, 5 p.m. Mountain Time is the standard start time for the product calls from Benny U. My name is Dave Webb. I work with communications and marketing at this great company, and we are thrilled to be joined as regularly by Dr. John Frederick Templeman, who has vast years of experience, not implying that he is old, but that he has a lot of great experience, and we're thrilled that he is willing to share it with us. So Dr. Templeman, we have a great kind of a broad discussion, I think we want to say. We were talking earlier about how to give the best information. Let's talk about supplementation in general. Would you give us some of your perspective, please?
Tonight's presentation is a little bit different than normal because normally we would have someone tell us a story about their experience with one of the many products that are in the satchel, if you wish, of the Benny U company that we have designed for people's health. These are called supplements. We are a supplement company. And what is different this evening is that I've received a number of calls over the past, say, almost a month. And I received 2 emails the other day that made me think that possibly we should be talking about the basics of supplementation just one time in review. It's something that I've done several times in my career because people tend to accept supplementation without really understanding the logic and the compelling reason for doing so. So we'll start out by talking about the fact that we are not machines. I don't like the comparison of the body to machine because it falls very short of the incredible complexity that the creator or our creator, I tend to believe that that's the way we came about, put in place in order that the organism which we call our body is able to meet most of the challenges that we receive in terms of illness, sickness, debility, etc., in increments that we can deal with unless there's an absolute avalanche of coincidence or of danger that really cannot be compensated for. But the body is so marvelous. And what it does is that it keeps us in a state of equilibrium, which in medicine is called homeostasis. Now, to give you an idea briefly of what that means, it means that all of the chemical makeup of our body, all of the multiple chemicals that come together in this marvelous machine, are maintained within a very narrow range of variability. There can be some variability, and in fact, there are probably variabilities within this homeostatic stretch that are millions and millions of adjustments within a minute or two in order to be able to have the wonderful thing that we would call equilibrium or good health. Now, in order to be able to have the body do that, it is innately programmed so that it can, but we need to provide for it the raw materials in order for it to be able to do that. And primarily, these come from the nutrition that we choose to take into our bodies, sometimes wisely, sometimes less wisely, in order to be able to give our body everything that it requires in order that it can do what it has been intended to do. And the body continues to do this, even though challenges sometimes may be insurmountable, death may be close, until the last heartbeat and until the last breath is drawn, the body is still attempting to achieve this equilibrium, this balance called homeostasis, that is the cradle within which life is nourished. Now, when we bring our nutrition into the body, it is in 2 large categories. The largest of these are what we would call macronutrients, and everyone knows them as fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. And they can be used for regulatory function. They can be used for structural repair and maintenance. They can be used to restore dysfunction as long as they are there in an appropriate supply and appropriate quantities. So fats, proteins, carbohydrates, the fuel, and the structural functional input that we require in terms of raw materials. The other large category, and I say large even though it has a title called micronutrients, and they're called micronutrients simply because they're very much smaller than what we would take in as fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. So we do not require quantitatively nearly as many of these micronutrients, but they are absolutely essential because these micronutrients are involved, and we could know them, perhaps we would know them a little bit better by the terms vitamins and minerals. But these micronutrients are involved in every single metabolic process, metabolism being that wonderful mixture, if you wish, of functions that goes on all of the time in order to maintain life and to have homeostasis perpetuated. Now, the medical world does not really appreciate, to the degree that the supplement world does, how important nutrition is. When I went to medical school, and this was many, many years ago, and it's gotten better since, but it is certainly far from perfect, nutrition was simply not taught to medical doctors. Or if we were exposed to it, we were exposed to it for a matter of a few hours, and the purpose was appropriately labeled, but inappropriately dealt with in terms of depth and complexity. So that when you see your family doctor or when you see your specialist who have been trained in medical schools, while they may have very adequate training for what they're trying to do with you, there is a deep and profound abyss in their formation. And it is generally around the idea of understanding nutrition and why it is important and the ways in which it is important. Now, why do we bother to supplement if, as many pundits have said over the years, and I believe absolutely incorrectly, that if you eat a healthy diet, you will have absolutely everything that you require in proper quantities for your body to adequately function. Now, most of us exist in a state of partial dysfunction, and everything is not going as well as we would want it in our bodies. And that is the proof that when the input in terms of nutrition falls short of the threshold of adequacy, that there is dysfunction that medicine possibly would not recognize because it falls into something called a subclinical manifestation or category, but it is nonetheless dysfunction. And even though medicine recognizes dysfunction only when it becomes catastrophic and they can put the attachment to it of a disease name, they are wrong. And we can do so much better, or at least our bodies can do so much better, if we absolutely guarantee that they are receiving everything that they require in terms of input and raw materials. Now, a good diet is the basis of good health. There's no question about that. But even if you were to follow what I believe to be the ideal diet, which would be a Mediterranean diet, if you were to follow a Mediterranean diet absolutely perfectly in this imperfect world, you would be unable to get adequate amounts of everything that your body requires to fulfill its full function. And the reason for this is relatively simple. It is a man-made shortage of adequate amounts of nutrients. Usually fats, carbohydrates, and protein are in adequate amounts, but the micronutrients are certainly not. And when they are required for every single metabolic process in the body, and they are not there in adequate amounts, things begin to go wrong. So supplementation, along with diet and exercise, are the triad of things that lead to optimal health. Obviously, diet is the most important. Exercise would be the second most important. But if you eliminate supplementation in a day and age when the food that we eat does not have the nutrition that we require in adequate amounts, then you are not going to be able to optimize your situation. Now, how do we get there? Well, we got there because, unfortunately, for centuries now, if not millennia, we have been growing our food, feeding it in terms of the animals that we eat, on imperfect nutrition for the animals and imperfect nutrition for the plants. So that the plants and the animals both, when we consume them, do not have everything in their body that we require. Now, I'm going to make a little aside here that I think is important. We are dealing in the whole world now. It used to be only a Western phenomenon, but now we are dealing with it in the whole world, an epidemic of obesity. An epidemic meaning a large number of cases, much larger than we would ordinarily expect from normal circumstances. That is called an epidemic. And obesity in the United States, for example, when you consider its subset of overweightness, is now a fact of life for 70% of our people. I postulate, and I don't think I have too many people in my corner when I talk about this theorizing, but I postulate that part of the reason for obesity is the simple fact that our bodies understand that everything they require for their existence, with the exception of water and air, is in short supply. And the body knows that the proper place to get this is with food. So if the body finds that it is falling short, particularly in the category of micronutrients, then it is going to try and get to adequate levels. And it will use everything at its disposition in order to be able to get there, including drives like hunger. So give your body inadequate or calorically adequate, but nutritionally inadequate food, and it is going to try and get more of that food because that food does not have everything that it requires. Now, like I say, I don't believe that everybody yet, as an expert, is in the same category as I am when I talk about one of the major drives towards obesity is the shortage of adequate nutrition that the body senses and that it attempts to be able to compensate for by taking in greater amounts of food that is required for everything except subtle nutrition, and therefore is the excess energy is converted to fat, and we end up with all of the diseases which are associated with obesity. So that's one reason. And the cause of that, of course, is what we would call soil depletion. Once again, this is a concept that up until even the present day, many experts, considering themselves experts in nutrition, will argue against. But it is a functionally incorrect argument to believe that everything that we can require in terms of nutrients is going to be present in a diet that we can easily access. We certainly cannot. The other reason for this, or the other major reason, there are certainly several, is that the horticulturists or the agricultural scientists who have been working over the years to make food taste better, look better, and last longer has been very successful at selectively breeding, even using genetic enhancement, to be able to get food that looks wonderful, that actually tastes delicious. I know of nothing that tastes as good, in my experience, as fast food, but which is nutritionally deplete. And so therefore, by eating the way that we eat, the food coming from the ground which we till, and the food for the animals which we raise coming again from the ground that we till and have tilled for centuries, which is depleted of the essential things that plants require for their nutrition, and that animals eating plants will also require for their nutrition. So we just don't have it. It isn't there. Anyone who wants to look at a very good article that is a bit dated now, but still very, very useful, should go and look at the article, which I believe was in Life magazine, and it was called Dirt Poor. So we're going to proceed accepting that we are getting our nutrition from depleted soils, and for that reason, the food which tastes good, which looks magnificent, and, for example, a tomato can sit on your counter in your kitchen for upwards of 2 and 3 weeks. Never intended by nature, but nature has been manipulated by the scientists so that now we have developed food not for the nutritional quality and quantity, but rather for its ability to endure and be edible much longer than it would have been in the past. Now, to give you an idea of the degree to which there is depletion, it has been calculated, and there's a good article out there about it you may be able to find if you Google the idea of nutrition in oranges, that makes the comparison that someone of my age, so already advanced age, but my generation, would have to consume 7 oranges in order to be able to get the same amount of nutrition, essential nutrition that could be found in an orange, that my grandmother would have been able to obtain from one single orange. So it really is significant, which means that supplementation should not simply be a whiff and a sniff of what our body requires, but adequate amounts and in sufficient variety to cover all of the areas that our body requires. Now, let's look one more thing. First of all, everything in the body that we do eat, consume, or is made into something for our body or energy for the functions of our body is at nano size. Nothing can make it into the cells, which is where all of the catalytic breaking down of elements that are taken into the body, and anabolic, meaning the building up of everything that is built in the body, by the body, that's where it all takes place. It takes place at the cellular level. And so nanotechnology has now allowed us to take supplements from nature and to render them to the nanoscale so that much of the body's work, which previously was to take in large pieces of things, of food, of nutrition, and to break them down gradually until they were at the nanoscale. Now, the nanoscale is standardly 3 orders of magnitude smaller than the kind of things that we would eat if we were thinking about eating. And a lot of work has to go into turning an orange into the elements that are required for the body that come from the orange. And it's a plethora of things. It's not a single thing, but that's the way nature is. Now, plants. Why do we bother to eat plants? I'm not going to talk about why we eat animals because frankly, I think we would do very well if we didn't eat animals because we can get all of the nutrition in the terms of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates that our body really requires without ever eating any animal matter. Now, that may remove a lot of tasty things from our diet. Nonetheless, it's true that we could be adequately nourished without having to eat animal matter. But why do we eat plants? Well, let's take a look at the simple fact of survival. We live in an environment where there are numerous challenges that could carry us away, could lead us either to illness, sickness, deprivation, and eventually death if we did not have the right things. And that is equally true of plants. But plants face the same kind of environmental challenges that we do. Plants, for example, get cancer, many different types of cancer. Plants are attacked by microbes. Bacteria kill them. Viruses kill them. And fungus kills them in greater amounts than it does humans. But you'll recognize that these are all the terms referring to those microorganisms which threaten our lives when they get into places in our body where they shouldn't be in quantities that we cannot tolerate. Now, the immune system is a wonderful defense system. There's no question about that. But we eat the plants because they have elaborated something called phytochemicals, meaning chemicals derived from plants, that when we eat them, they are the building blocks of everything that we require in order to be able to make what our body needs. For example, let's take the nervous system. The nervous system could not function without the presence of something called neurotransmitters. Now, the term neurotransmitter literally means a chemical which will carry an impulse, an electrical impulse, from the end of one neuron to the intake of a second neuron across that synaptic gap. And there are many of these neurotransmitters that the body requires. When the body has adequate amounts of what it needs from the plants that have been consumed as food, then the neurotransmitter supply is adequate. And the structure of the neurotransmitter is also ideal. Now, here's a second piece of information that I believe to be true, that I still have not received the kind of comforting numbers in terms of experts who would agree with me, but I think it helps you to understand what I'm talking about. When the body is trying to build serotonin, for example, serotonin is the happy transmitter, the one that is associated with feeling good. There are others as well, but it is the principal one. And of the micronutrients that our body requires, 7 individual micronutrients are required to make an adequate molecule of serotonin. However, assuming that we live in a nutrition-depleted society, are eating food which has inadequate nutrition in it, and we may not be supplementing, we're going to have a deficiency of at least one of those micronutrients, if not many. And the body will do what it can to survive. So if it can't get, for example, zinc, it will go along the, you remember the old periodic table of elements, And it will go to one of the other elements which has some of the same qualities as zinc, but which may be very different than zinc. And it will use that and insert it in the manufacture of the serotonin. And so you would get something which looks molecularly like serotonin, except chemically there will be a substitution made by the body that will allow you to have serotonin and to have it function close to normal, but not exactly normal, because it hasn't got the perfect combination of elements that would be required as micronutrients for its fabrication. So you could have serotonin, for example, and it could be functional, but it would fall short of ideal. It would be imperfect because a substitution of some nutritional element would have taken place. Now, if that's the case, it may do 75% of what serotonin would do in the body, but it will not do 100% of what normal serotonin would do. Therefore, it would be insufficiently present, and the functionality of the body that depends upon serotonin would be impaired as a result. So now you have not enough functional serotonin, and it is causing you to experience dysphoria, sadness, possibly even depression. And the doctors come along and they have said, as the scientists have told them, you need more serotonin. But serotonin is not something that they can manufacture outside the body. And it is not possible, therefore, to give it as a supplement, because there are some drugs which, in fact, are supplements. Insulin is the best example. Type 1 and type 2 diabetics have a relative lack of insulin. And we can make that insulin. We used to use that insulin from animals, but it was less than effective because it carried all of the antigens from the animals as well. So the scientists were able to take the raw chemicals and make the insulin in such a way, using human gene technology, that that insulin is a perfect match in the body and therefore can be used effectively. Well, we can't do that with serotonin. We can't do that with the vast majority of things that are inadequate supply that our body absolutely depends upon. And so we get mistakes made by the body. We get presumptions of nutrition when true nutrition is not there. And the final phase in what I'm saying, the last take-home piece, is that without supplementation, an adequate supplementation, an adequate variety and quantity in supplementation, you cannot optimize fully your health, no matter how wonderful your body is at being able to meet the challenges of disease and environmental problems that we're going to be facing, such as pollution, for example. So that's why we supplement. That's why principally we use supplements which are made from plants, because the plants have done the evolutionary groundwork that is required for them to elaborate something very close to what we need, and that when we consume that adequately in an adequate supplemental dose to complement our nutrition, we then can reach this wonderful state of equilibrium, balance, or good health. So it is long, it is wandering, but I hope you've been able to seize the essence of my presentation. And for those of you who have written to me and sent me emails, I think it will make some of the questions that you were asking me easier to answer. Supplement adequately. Find companies that you trust. Do your due diligence on the products themselves, and then take them in a trial of one and see what it does for you. You will be amazed at how much better life gets when you give your body everything that it requires in terms of nutrients, and it works its wonders with this, with the programming that I think God put into place. So thank you very much for listening tonight. Hopefully Dave will be able to edit this so that it makes sense. And I will see you again next week. This is Dr. Templeman coming to you from Thailand. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Have a terrific night. We will get this edited and posted on Facebook and on our YouTube and Vimeo accounts. Thanks again to Dr. T. I'm hoping he just stayed up, not woke up. It is now just about 5:34 p.m. here in Utah, and we are signing off. Wish you all the very best. Have a great night. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.